Good afternoon. We're going to ask that everyone please take your seats. We're going to go ahead and get started. We would like to officially welcome everyone here today to the Community Foundation for Palm Beach and Martin County's 7th Annual Founders Luncheon. I'm Holly Davis, anchor at WPTV News Channel 5. I am honored to be the MC and panel moderator for today's program. This is really going to be illustrating the impact that everyone in this room has on our community. We've got some great discussion planned for you all. And when we talk about who this impacts and who plays a role in this, we're talking about fund holders and board members, nonprofits. You all are just a key to this success. So let's dive right in. Your community foundation has awarded over $22 million during the last 3 years under her leadership. She is a former vice president of Northern Trust, one of our founding sponsors today. Please extend a warm welcome as I invite the foundation chair of the board, Sherry Barrett, to the stage.
Thank you, Holly. Well, welcome to our annual celebration of you and the great work you do to make our community a better place. Did you know that we are about to turn 50? Not me, I can only wish. But in 2 years, your community foundation will celebrate its 50th anniversary. We've come a long way since 1972, when Michael and Winsome McIntosh and Shannon Sadler started the community foundation with a $50,000 endowment. Today, we oversee $200 million of assets that donors have set aside to support the work of nonprofit organizations, both here in South Florida and in communities around the country. And we have a dream. By the time our 50th anniversary rolls around in 2022, we want to grow that $200 million to $250 million. And that's an ambitious goal, but we're well on our way. And our CEO, Brad Hurlburt, will elaborate on that in just a few minutes. Let me say 3 important thank yous before I turn the podium over to Brad. First, to our donors. We celebrate your generous spirit and your willingness to share your time, treasure, and talent to improve the quality of life for everyone, and I do mean everyone, in our community. Thank you. So a hand for the donors. To the nonprofit leaders in the audience, we celebrate your vision, your passionate leadership, and the impact you are making on the lives of so many people. So thank you all as well, and a round of applause for you. And last, but certainly not least, I'd like to thank my fellow board members and our committee members for their partnership, their hard work, and their wise counsel. Would you all please stand, and we can thank you as well. Board and committee members. Thank you all. Now, my term as board chair will end in June, and I will be so proud to pass the baton to my successor, Julie Fisher Cummings. Julie, would you please stand so we can celebrate what you are about to do? Thank you. Through your philanthropic work, you are building our future. I'll leave you with a quote from Robert Louis Stevenson. Don't judge each day by the harvest you reap, but by the seeds that you plant. And now, over to Holly. Thank you.
Sherry, thank you so much for your work. Your passion clearly shows, and what you do for our community is inspiring. Let's give Sherry another round of applause. So I mentioned, let's dive right in. It's nice to see that many of you have already done that with your salads. Go ahead, enjoy while we continue with our program. It is really a pleasure just to look out over the crowd and see the hundreds of faces who have joined us today for this celebration of philanthropy. Your attendance is really a true testament of the strength of our philanthropic community. And on behalf of your community foundation, thank you again for joining us. So now please join me in welcoming to the stage the Community Foundation's President and CEO, Brad Hurlburt.
We did it. Well, welcome everybody. On behalf of your Community Foundation, we're so glad to be with you all here today. We're here together for the 7th time to honor all of you and to advance our shared task, inspiring others to create a world where everyone has a chance to succeed. This event is a true celebration of our past and present. It's also a time to take a glimpse into our future and deliver a charge to those who will help us amplify our impact through the Community Foundation. So why do we serve? We believe in the power of philanthropy to uplift everyone. We advance this belief by partnering with donors, community leaders to bring about positive change. We believe when any part of our community is better served or supported, it creates opportunities that benefit us all. People are at the heart of everything we do. For the 2nd year, On the Table conversations brought more than 3,000 people together. We were inspired by the turnout. Real-life discussions about real-life issues. And let's take a look at the video.
On the Table is really a community-wide initiative that brings together all community members and residents to engage in granted conversations about what's happening in our community, from education to housing, economic security. Whatever you feel the issues are, it's an opportunity for community members to come together and talk about it.
You really need to have different voices, different people from different socioeconomic levels who are having this conversation so you can really know what's going on the ground. Because sometimes when you're kind of stuck at meeting to meeting and you think you're addressing the needs, you really may not be. You may be missing the mark altogether and wondering why your outcomes are not what you're expecting.
Everybody has a different story. And I think a lot of times you assume like your experience is pretty general and a lot of people might experience the same thing. So I think taking time to sit down and really reflect on what's happening, what are we doing right, what areas do we see lack, really opens up that conversation to be able to then address those issues. And without that conversation, oftentimes they just go ignored.
My voice was heard by the lead of the county, the district, our community, parents that have kids just like our age. In order for our community to succeed, we need to hear everyone.
The youth are our future, and if we want to make change, we got to include our youth. It's almost like when you're at your own dinner table and you have your family and you bring everybody to the table and you have these off-the-cuff discussions, and a lot of times that's where you come up with your solutions.
So the chance to hear from the community over the last 2 years has been vital. Your views are guiding conversations and grant making. We heard about housing, and as a result, we rolled out the first priority area, community revitalization. This includes creating green spaces for families and individuals, investing in health, well-being, and building and improving homes and neighborhoods. In our first year, we impacted the lives of 20,000 people. This year, we're adding educational attainment and positive youth development. Over the next few months, we'll develop our plan to address these critical needs through grant making and collaboration. Sometimes the most effective way to make a difference is by partnering with others. Hurricane Dorian made landfall on September 1st of 2019, leaving devastation across the Bahamas. Our thanks go out to Nikki and Ira Harris, who began our disaster relief fund for the Bahamas with a $100,000 challenge. After their initial commitment, we received donations from across the country, including support from other community foundations, private foundations, individuals, and our own fund holders. Together with the town of Palm Beach United Way, we will raise upwards of $2 million for our friends and neighbors in the Bahamas. Thank you. Thank you for all you do to advance the mission of this community foundation. One of the ways the foundation works with our donors to make a difference is through grant making. Last year, we provided more than $12 million in grants, including $1 million for scholarships to local students. We're one of the largest providers of scholarships in our region. So in recognition of our nearly 50 years of service, we have launched the Impact Amplified campaign. It personifies the why, the what we do, and how we impact the community. The Community Foundation is uniquely positioned to respond to critical needs and help solve problems. There is an Impact Amplified campaign card on your table. We stand ready to work with you to improve our community. So where do we begin? Together. How do we amplify our impact? Together. I can't wait to see what we will accomplish, not in 20 years, but in 2, 3, or 5. Thank you so much.
Brad, I have to tell you, I'm glad that we weren't standing on the stage side by side because there's no height difference at all. Thank you again, Brad. Up next, one of our founding sponsors representing the Lifeline Fund. Please welcome Alessandra Arenau.
Hi everyone, I'm Alessandra Arno. I am a family member of Julie and Caroline Cummings and a board member of Lovelight. Lovelight is a multi-generational family foundation that's mission is to empower at-risk women and girls. For many years, I've been so in awe of the work that Julie and Caroline do and how they address their mission with such passion, compassion, and thoughtfulness. When I first joined the board, our last executive director had retired. And we were looking on finding out how to be most effective donors and working with the resources that we had. So there was much thought given about how to advance the work most effectively, and we felt that it didn't justify full-time staff. Being that, we thought that it was certainly also not part of the work that really excites us, having to focus on the logistics, which is why we decided to become a special interest donor-advised fund at the Community Foundation for Palm Beach and Martin counties. The Community Foundation provides us end office support, does a fantastic job with the diligence process, finds us new grants, and takes us on site visits. They have helped us to facilitate the work in such a profound way that it allows us to focus on the part of the work that really gives us joy and really inspires us. So much of the work we do is about community building, and with the size and the resources of the Community Foundation, we can build those connections and further our impact in the community and with the community. My grandmother, Marjorie Fisher, was a big supporter of the Community Foundation. In fact, she was on the board for many years. She believed they helped to address local needs and helped individuals and families find their passions and then execute them. 3 generations later, we still believe that and feel even stronger. It's clear to us through the work we do with the Lovelight Fund. And we want to thank the Community Foundation for their hard work, their incredible innovation, and for being such great partners. We feel so grateful to be working with you, alongside you, and for the thoughtfulness and passion that you put into our work. You are truly the unsung heroes of the 4 Impact space. So on behalf of Love Light, we thank you for all that you do and for helping us create a more meaningful impact with the community. I would now like to introduce you to someone who has experience with the Community Foundation and who's worked closely with our family, Doug Batonti Stewart. After nearly 20 years of professional development experience serving groups like Children's Hospital of Michigan and the University of Michigan Children and Women's Hospital, Doug became the first executive director of the Max M. and Marjorie S. Fisher Foundation in 2007. As a member of the first Next Gen Giving effort of the family years back that Caroline, my cousin, chaired with our cousin David, and is now foundation trustees with them, we have had the privilege to work alongside Doug for the past 13 years. We actually just celebrated his 13-year anniversary with us. So thank you, Doug. The Max and Marjorie Fisher Foundation is a multi-generational family foundation with 4 impact areas: early childhood development, impact investing, arts and culture, and Jewish. Doug is going to touch on our relationship with the Community Foundation with our arts and culture partnership. The Community Foundation has been such an asset to our arts and culture work, and we have been able to advance our mission because of the Community Foundation and their partnership. As Doug is making his way to the stage, I'd like to share how grateful we are as a family to have a leader like Doug. He's a great steward of our work that our grandparents entrusted us with and advances their legacy in the community by leading with integrity and shared values.
Thank you, Alessandra. So when Brad called me and said, "Would you mind speaking today?" I said, "Absolutely, Brad, I'll be there." And then he said, "Could you talk a little bit about the relationship that the foundation has with the Community Foundation?" I said, "Absolutely, absolutely." Then I got here and I saw that the title of my 5 minutes is The Joy of Giving, and I couldn't be happier that that's the title for my 5 minutes. I've been in philanthropy as a fundraiser for 20 years before Julie saw me at Children's Hospital of Michigan and thought enough of me to consider me for the first executive director of the foundation. And I've been learning at her side ever since. And also, I had the pleasure of working alongside Julie and Mrs. Fisher for the last 9 years of her life. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to tell you how we do our work, and I promise you it's still going to be 5 minutes, Brad. How we do our work, because joy is embedded in that. I want to tell you just one quick story about how the Community Foundation has helped us and is a critical partner with the foundation. And then I want to end with a very short story that underscores the joy of giving. So how do we do this work? So with a family that has more than 50 members, with 5 generations and growing, it is all about family. And there's a lot of joy in that, and there's a lot of work in that. So we've crafted an intentional culture about how we do this work. And what we're looking for is we're looking to work together with the community, with the parents, with the families closest to these issues, to work toward justice to repair this world. And we do that through looking for shared alignment with these families. We're looking for shared learning along the way. And we're looking to act together, so shared action. And what are we looking for? So we're looking for increased engagement with the work and with the people inside the work. We're, of course, looking for increased impact, but we're also looking for joy, increased joy. So, and we do this work with 4 sets of partners. So it's not just the family. It's not just our professional partners in the field, but it's the Community Foundation for Palm Beach and Martin counties. And most importantly, it's the families who live closest to these issues that allow us inside to help do the work. That's one of the most major gifts that we receive every year, the families allowing us into this work. So when the Fisher family decided that they wanted to do more work in Palm Beach, and specifically around arts and culture in the region, there was no question that we needed to talk to Brad and his team. And so they helped us. They made this seamless for us. And we have a staff of 9 in Detroit. So you'd think we'd be very able and capable to do the work wherever we needed to. But Brad's team had authentic relationships in the community. Because of the hard work that you all have done, we were able to identify partners early that shared our values. The Community Foundation stewarded all of the site visits. They worked with the trustees and the committee members of the family and really extended our team. There was such a tremendous value that they brought to us. So for someone who just landed from Detroit a few minutes ago, and Brad welcomed me in as he always does, we feel at home here, not only because the family has made Palm Beach their home for decades, but because the Community Foundation brings us home every time we're here. So if you have your own family foundation and you're lucky enough to have staff, consider utilizing the partnerships with the Community Foundation to extend your work. So as I'm about to wrap up, and I'm mindful as I see some other partners in the room, I should say that the Community Foundation also houses a permanent endowment for the Boys and Girls Club in Palm Beach County, so that was another partnership of ours. But let me finish with a story, just very briefly, that underscores the joy of giving. So Julie and I was so grateful to be her partner with her mother's philanthropy, and there was one afternoon that we were sitting with Mrs. Fisher, and she was looking through some thank you notes that she received from families whose children she had helped sponsor through mentoring programs and then 4 years of college. And usually, Mrs. Fisher would look at thank you notes and say, "This is really sweet," and she would move those off to the side and say, "What else are we gonna do? We gotta get going here." But this time she paused, and she said something to me and to Julie that underscores the joy of this giving. She said, "I'll never be able to give enough to make up for how grateful I am for these families who have allowed me into their lives." I'd never heard a donor say those words before. I'd heard plenty of donors say, "Thank you for giving me this opportunity," but never that I'll never be able to give enough to make up for how grateful I am for these families who have allowed me into their lives. So that is where my joy comes from this giving and being welcomed into the Fisher family. And thank you all for welcoming us into Palm Beach and our partnership with the Community Foundation. Thank you. Colony?
Thank you, Doug. Doug, by the way, South Florida's 50-degree weather, it must seem like a dream coming from Detroit, right? We would like to invite to the stage Craig Glover from the RISE Initiative. Craig is here on behalf of Rybovich, one of our founding sponsors. Craig, please come up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Helani, and good afternoon to all. I'm very pleased to be here today on behalf of 1,643 families living in the neighborhoods of northern West Palm Beach. There's a movement afoot. Here's a glimpse. The movement is called RISE, a partnership between members of 12 neighborhoods that make up the north end of West Palm Beach, and many of this area's most important civic, government, business, and philanthropic organizations. We are joining together to break the cycle of intergenerational poverty, plaguing many residents of these forgotten neighborhoods. RISE is much more than a housing program or even a community revitalization plan. RISE is resident-led and focused on building strong, economically diverse, and healthy neighborhoods, one family at a time. RISE is based upon 3 pillars, proven effective across the country by our partners' purpose-built communities, and they are mixed-income housing, cradle-to-career education, and community wellness. In partnership with the Quantum Foundation, Community Foundation of Palm Beach and Martin Counties, and the North End Coalition of Neighborhoods, and in particular, we're really thankful for Quantum and for Community Foundation to fund this work. RISE spent the better part of 2019 introducing ourselves to residents, getting to know them, building trust, and seeking their involvement. In just 9 short months, RISE, in partnership with our resident volunteers, hosted 3 family fun events that touched nearly 2,000 individuals, more than 100 in-depth one-on-one meetings with community residents, and 3 weekends of door-to-door canvassing with over 2,000 doors knocked and 600+ conversations, as illustrated on the map that you saw previously. Our focus is the communities most in need, those west of Broadway. We're also helpful. We're helping many of our residents to improve the quality of their lives today by connecting them to existing resources, service providers, and even employers. On this year's Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service, our coalition of residents connected with their neighbors, while Palm Beach Atlantic student volunteers clean up garbage in one of our most distressed neighborhoods. This was just one of the many great ideas that came directly from our residents as a result of a series of community events. Our residents came back from that day of service feeling energized and fulfilled as a result of helping their neighbors. We have a few of our resident volunteers with us today who represent over 40 resident advisors, and I'd like for them to please stand to be recognized. The results have been overwhelming, and that's only the beginning. In 2020, we'll continue to engage the local community as we take the next steps to improve mixed-income housing options, support improvement of our local schools, connect residents to local employers, and partner with the area's leading healthcare providers to improve community wellness. This is your community working with you. Great wealth and high rates of poverty exist side by side in the North End of West Palm Beach. We need the help of everyone in this room to prove that together we will rise. Please join this movement. Thank you.
And now it is showtime. Time to turn our attention to the portion of our program where we're going to start our panel discussion, Power of Place, a conversation on housing. Housing stability, think about it. It affects nearly every aspect of our lives, from how to retain a job, succeed in school, to stay healthy, safe, build wealth for our families. And even if your housing is secure, chances are very likely that you know someone who is or has been affected. The Community Foundation is committed to affordable housing and knows it really is the cornerstone of economic stability and wealth building for families. And really, if you think about it, there's no single solution, but perhaps there are ideas that can be shared and further explored and developed into strategies that can bring about a positive change. So today's experts will help us frame the issues. I want you to please help me in welcoming to the stage Jonathan B. Brown, Director of the Palm Beach County Department of Housing and Economic Sustainability. Also with us today, Suzanne Cabrera, President and CEO of the Housing Leadership Council of Palm Beach County. The Honorable Ann Gerwig, Mayor of the Village of Wellington. And finally, Jack Weir, president of the East Wind Development Group. So we have met previously. This is just such an informative bunch, and they're extremely passionate about this topic. We've set our ground rules, and I told you guys, just go. I said, there's no order, have fun with it, and really give us a sense. You guys are on the front lines of these issues, so we want to know what it is that you encounter every day, what it is you see, and how we can grow and go from there. So to ensure that everyone here has a common understanding of the topic, we're going to open the conversation with the question, what is affordable housing, and what does that look like to the residents of Palm Beach County and Martin County?
Okay. I'll start with that first question. For Palm Beach County, we define affordable housing as someone that's not paying more than 30% of their gross income toward their housing debt or their housing payment. Because we deal with housing HOAs and condo associations, sometimes we'll increase that up to 35%. But for a family of four, you're talking about a family whose household income does not exceed $66,900. 4 people living off of $66,900 is not a lot.
Yeah.
So that's that 80% of the income area.
And just to add to that, I think Jonathan brings up that 30% rule, and I just call it the rule of 3. So if you take someone's income, a starting teacher makes about $40,000 a year in Palm Beach County. They can afford a home that's about 3 times that amount, so $120,000. Not a lot of homes for $120,000 in Palm Beach County. The average home price is $350,000. which takes $116,000 a year, and for Martin County, it's $386,000. So you need almost $130,000 a year to be able to afford that. So that's something to consider when you go through the people that make your life so livable during the day: childcare workers, people who work and make sure your laundry is ready at the dry cleaner, people who take care of your parents. They typically are not making anywhere near that amount, not anywhere near the $63,000 that Jonathan talks about. This is something where just pay attention when you go through your day and try to think, how are those people surviving on that when we have such high rentals and home prices? Even rentals, you can do the same thing, divide by 3, and you'll see that even a school teacher will need $1,100 a month to pay that in rent to be affordable, and that's really difficult. In some places, it's well over $2,000. So it's something to really think about how unaffordable our county can be for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I know you and I were talking earlier, and you mentioned to me that you received a phone call from the CEO of Wellington Regional who said, hey, we need some help over here. Not everybody is a doctor or a nurse.
Right, and there's a lot of support staff that comes in that type of facility. And we really see another problem. When we talk about if you can't live in the community that you work in, it creates a whole other problem of transportation. So by having a place where you can live and work in the same community, it's a lot easier, it's a lot less expensive, and it's a lot higher quality of life. So we're looking for those areas that we can help provide that. And one thing in Wellington is we've looked at a lot of what Jack is involved in. Those are a lot of rental facilities that are under construction or hopefully soon. But in the meantime, we've noticed a major difference if they're homeowners. So we've tried to engage our residents that are renters and look for ways to make properties turn over into ownership instead of just rentals.
Jack, I know as a news organization at WPTV, it seems like lately we've done quite a few stories about new developments popping up, affordable housing, or it's going to be slated for affordable housing. And so maybe from a viewer standpoint, you think, okay, this need is being met. But you said that's not the case at all.
No, I mean, the problem ultimately is we're just not producing enough housing relative to the population growth that we have. I mean, Palm Beach County now has close to 1.5 million residents. The population just in the last 10 years has grown 12%, so 160,000. Even if you take a household size of 2.5, that's 60,000 units, we're just not producing that many units across the board, and certainly not affordable. Holly, the other point I wanted to make is you'll sometimes hear the term workforce housing. So what Jonathan was talking about below, what's called 80% of area median income, is generally regarded as affordable. Above that, workforce housing, you have a need both for rental apartments, which have become increasingly expensive, and also for home ownership. So even households that are earning $80,000, $90,000 a year still find it difficult. That in turn comes back to what Ann talked about, the difficulty in attracting businesses. The BDB board is trying to attract businesses to Palm Beach County. West Palm Beach is trying to attract financial services companies, but for each principal or senior executive, there's 2, 3, or 4 support staff, and they need housing as well. And those businesses are not going to come here. The businesses that are here are not going to be able to grow if they can't have housing for the folks that work there.
One of the statistics, and you will receive a handout before you all leave, but I know that you touched on this briefly, Suzanne, but again, the average Palm Beach County rent $1,600, which requires an income of just around $60,000. I mean, you do the math, it's tough to stretch that.
It really is, and that's one of the frequent calls I get is people looking for affordable rentals. We're working very closely with the teachers of Palm Beach County, and they're getting very frustrated. They knew what they were getting into. They knew they were never going to be really wealthy, but they also didn't anticipate having to be able to live with a roommate or find a spouse or a partner just to be able to afford a rental here in Palm Beach County. It's very frustrating for them. I'm working with a teacher right now, 59 years old. Been teaching with the school system for a long time. Her daughter wanted to move out. She needed another roommate. At 59, she has to live with a roommate, and it's just not a good situation for her. And she's so close to becoming a homeowner. She's got good credit. We can almost get her there, but we just can't find the affordable housing stock. And with the amount of rent she's paying right now, she's just not being able to save the money and get the money together to do that. But we found that with most of the teachers. They said, gee, if I could buy a home, this would be my home. I'd stay in the classroom. So that's really resonated with me, that's really important, that we do take care of the people who take care of the most important people in our lives, our children, our future.
You all come from different areas and represent different facets, but give us maybe a snapshot of where Palm Beach County and Martin County stand on affordable housing, and then if you could compare it statewide and maybe even throw in some national statistics as well.
Okay, I'll start with Palm Beach County, then Suzanne, I know you'll jump in on that. There was a report issued by the National Low-Income Housing Coalition a year or so ago, and it stated that you need to make at least $27.58 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Palm Beach County. Based on that report, we're the 4th highest cost county in the state. And so there's a lot of work that has to be done, and between the organizations that are represented here and others, we're trying our best to work through all of those issues. But, you know, as we've talked about economics, housing and economic development go hand in hand. And so while we're talking about the need of housing, we also need to talk about employers paying livable wages as well.
And nationally, I've found that we are really falling behind. In one area that's really important, which is housing and transportation costs, we fall behind New York City, San Francisco. Our housing costs are expensive, but the amount we need for transportation, most families need to have at least one car to be able to get to work, or they spend an awful lot of time on public transportation if they don't. On average, in Palm Beach and Martin County, people spend 66% of their income on housing and transportation, but if you make less than $50,000 a year, you spend 78% of your income on housing and transportation. Everything else has to fit in that bucket. Your groceries, everything you need for spending money when your kids are growing out of their sneakers every week, you gotta take that part of your money. So that's really startling when we can fall behind big city areas like, as I said, San Francisco, New York. Hawaii's got us beat. They're slightly higher at 81%, but we're almost up to the Hawaii range on how much it costs to live and be able to afford to get to our jobs, work, and school in our community.
So if you're not providing the housing where people are located, that means they have to travel long distances. In northern Palm Beach County, that means they're coming from Port St. Lucie. So what that means is they're spending an hour, 2 hours a day commuting. So they're not involved in their children's lives as much. They're not able to engage in the community as much. They have this time. So in addition to the economic hardship, they're not really as fully engaged as members of the community. They're not participating in the PTA or youth athletic leagues or other things. So in that sense, not having the housing near where people work diminishes the quality of life for all of us.
There's one thing I'd like to add to that also I serve on the executive board of the Florida League of Cities and the County League of Cities board also. It is the number 2 issue. Whenever city government comes together to talk about what's going on in the state, number 1 is always water. We know it's on the table. We have to have water to live. Number 2 isn't food, it's housing. Number 2 is almost across the board, always housing. How are we going to manage this? It's not affordable. And how are we going to meet the needs of our community?
Where does the red tape come in? Because people say, okay, we don't have affordable housing. We can sit here and talk about a fix, but why isn't it happening?
Jack, you want to start with that one?
Sure. Speaking from a private developer perspective. So there are a number of obstacles that we have in the current time. So one is high land costs. The second is high construction costs. And that's what's driving those higher rents. So I think the key to combating it really is for a more proactive part on the part of local government, recognizing that this is a community priority in the public interest. So for affordable households earning up to about $45,000 in Palm Beach County, there's the federal low-income housing tax credit program. The issue there is there just aren't enough resources. In Palm Beach County, there are 10 to 15 applications for every award that results in a successful development. At the state level, we have a thing that was actually started almost 30 years ago called the State Housing Trust Fund. You've also heard of it as the Sadowski Fund. And in Florida, we have a problem now, which is this trust fund is financed by the collection of documentary stamp taxes from all the counties across the state. However, the legislature for the past 17 years has gotten into the habit of sweeping these funds into general revenue and using it for non-housing related expenses. To give you an idea of the dimension of the problem, in the last fiscal year, Palm Beach County was scheduled to receive $17 million if the Housing Trust Fund had been fully funded. Instead, it received $2 million. The other $15 million were swept for non-housing related uses. The trust fund was designed so that when the economic cycle was strong and housing costs were high, there would be more funds available for use. That $15 million could have been leveraged with other funds and produced $100 million in financing, and that was off the table. So as a sage once said, when you're in a hole, one of the first things to do is stop digging. So one of the first things that the legislator could do is treat it as a trust fund and not a slush fund.
Because there's a natural nexus between, right. There's a nexus between that. When we see the times good like now, when real estate is selling, that's when this could be fully funded. And the state legislature isn't doing it for like nonsense. I think last year it was Hurricane Michael devastation. But the fact of the matter is, you keep using that for something that was not established for. There's other ways for them to finance those, but when we go up to Tallahassee, that's one of the priorities for the League of Cities also. This is statewide. It seems to be worse in our area because we're considered a donor. A lot more tax money that we're sending up doesn't come back here because we're some of the more affluent areas. But in the meantime, the statewide is facing the same problem. So it's a priority of the League of Cities to keep Sadowski funds intact. And when you hear Sadowski, it's kind of an awkward word, but it really is housing trust funds that were collected for that purpose that keep getting turned into other things.
Are other parts of the state in dire need, like Palm Beach and Martin County?
There are some other counties, especially in South Florida, that are impacted. And I think really it's helping the legislators understand that it's not just new construction. We're also using those dollars for foreclosure prevention. We're also using those dollars for housing rehab. It's one thing to say I have a home to live in, but is that home habitable? And what we found is that people are living in substandard housing, whether it's they don't have air conditions, leaky roofs, plumbing issues, and so these dollars go a long way. It's great when we have an opportunity to put accessible items within the home, whether it's ramps to allow people to age in place, because now I can get into my home. I'm in a wheelchair now, I can get into my home, or grab bars in the homes, or even in situations where there are disabilities, you can use certain techniques and certain devices to help people just to live where they are, so they don't have to go out and find more expensive housing or ultimately move out of the county. So we're in dire straits. I would say that cities, the counties to the south of us are there as well. Large counties are all facing a similar situation. And it's important that the legislators, as Jack said, continue to fully or look at fully funding those housing programs, that trust fund, so we can deal with the other needs and issues that are going on. Over the past year, the amount of foreclosure assistance, prevention assistance we've been providing has increased. Ironically, you would think, well, maybe it's because of the taxes, maybe it's because they can't afford their payments. No, it's homeowners associations that are foreclosing on low-income people, and we're trying to bail them out. And so there are a lot of needs and uses for these state dollars, and to encourage the legislature to fully fund it will absolutely have an impact on Palm Beach County and other counties.
It seems like there's a bit of a trickle-down effect as well. If the housing's not there, you all mentioned your kids can't get, the parental guidance that they need, and so on and so forth. So when you all stack it up, what do you tackle first in terms of trying to better the situation?
Well, each community has their own way of dealing with it, and I know a lot of local governments have their own programs. I mean, the county has their programs, but really, Suzanne, when they ask me about it, I say, call Suzanne. She's kind of the clearinghouse, so that's my fault. So I don't know what you tell them when they call you, but.
Hey, that's the problem, and I get calls, everything from a lot of calls from elderly, but the second highest category is parents saying, I need my kids to move out of the house. I mean, it's just gotten to the point where we live in Florida, we don't have basements. It's just not feasible for your kids to live with you forever. So I'll get them calling and saying they can't get their 37-year-old had to come back and live with them, and it's time for them to move out. So we do need higher wages. We do need to make sure that people can get employment, but we really need housing that's more affordable for folks, and that's the tough thing. People will call me and say, I need an $800 a month rental, and I look at their budget, I'm like, you can't begin to afford an $800 a month rental on what you're making. You can afford maybe $300 a month. So we have to look at all the strategies. I know I've invited Cindy from the Community Land Trust here. That's a really novel idea where people can really afford their homes because they don't have to pay for the land underneath. There's so many different ways that we can work on this problem, but it really is just, it starts with a home. I mean, with homelessness, it starts with a home. With people who need to be secure, that's what it starts with. Whether that's a rental, whether it's a, land trust lease, whatever it is, that's got to be the starting point. And just to put a cap on the importance of the state housing trust funds, since they started sweeping the funds, we've had over $271 million of Palm Beach County money that we've sent up to Tallahassee swept into general revenues. And Jonathan and I have this fun thing, gee, what could you do with $271 million to help the people of this county? It would be a whole lot. That would be keeping people in their homes. That's so critically important. Making rentals more affordable. There's so many things we could do. So that's got to be a starting point, but it's not even going to be enough. If we could get all that money restored, we're still going to have to work with the private sector, with businesses, to really make sure everybody gets that home.
Well, Suzanne, imagine not wanting your 40-something-year-old child to live with you in the non-existent basement. Understandable. Jack, get in on this.
So you had asked what can be done. So Plan A is obviously to push the state legislature to fund the trust fund. But there's another step that's being taken now, particularly by large counties in Florida. So Miami-Dade County issued $400 million in forever bonds. $200 million of that is designed to combat sea level rise and increase resiliency of roads, infrastructure, and buildings. Another $100 million is focused on affordable housing. City of Miami has issued $85 million in bonds focused on affordable housing that they hope to leverage into a $1 billion fund eventually. Orange County, population 100,000 less than Palm Beach County, has set up a $160 million fund over 10 years that will leverage other funds and is designed to produce 30,000 units that are affordable and workforce housing over a 10-year period. Broward County now appropriates $10 million annually as part of a long-term commitment to affordable housing. Palm Beach County has been very proactive in terms of funding the Phil Lewis Center and devoting funds to homelessness. On the affordable housing side, it's primarily been a conduit to pass through federal and state funds. So the one takeaway I'd ask you to think about when you leave today's talk is it may be that the time is right for Palm Beach County to think about a dedicated funding source for affordable and workforce housing.
Are we talking long-term, short-term? Can it be done in the short term?
Sure, it can be done. I mean, there are a number of options. As these other counties have done, they're doing bond issues, which enables you to ramp up in a hurry. There are three things that the county and also local governments can do in the short term to do things. One are density bonuses. So we're doing a development in Palm Beach Gardens, fairly affluent community, and 10% of the units of this luxury apartment development are set aside for workforce housing because of the density bonus that we received. So those rents are lower and the incomes are targeted to people who are nurses, store managers, local government workers, teachers, et cetera, so they can afford those units. It's basically a set aside within a market development. The other thing is they can do fee waivers. When I look at my development budget, after land, after construction costs, the third highest component are government fees. Those are building permit fees, those are impact fees, and those are utility fees. So one of the things that can be done if it's tied to a long-term commitment to affordability is there can be a reduction, a credit, or waiver of impact fees, for instance, on that. That will bring down the cost and enable a certain number of units to be set aside at lower rents. So, and then the third is gap financing. Like any developer, I have to go out and I have to actually raise investment funds. I invest equity, but then I have to raise third-party equity to supplement the construction loan. If there's a source of funding available so that I don't have to raise so much equity and can instead use a low-interest second mortgage loan from a county or municipality, I can charge lower rents and set aside units for lower incomes as well. That's how we can work with existing developments and developments that are planned to help solve this affordable and workforce housing issue.
Yeah. And Jack mentioned the bond, and I think the bond is absolutely an option to be considered. One of the things that we do in the county relates to workforce housing, where we ensure that as developers are building certain number of market rate units, that they have to also build workforce housing units. They have the option to build on-site, off-site, or pay into a fund. We also, as Jack mentioned about impact fee assistance, we provide an impact fee assistance for those developers that are looking to get some sort of breaks or discounts on what credits on what they're looking to construct. But wherein I think the effort has to be made is it's not just the county. There has to be assistance from the municipalities. You would probably be surprised at the number of municipalities that don't even have a housing department or housing division. And you know, from a Palm Beach County perspective, we looked at the numbers maybe a little over a year ago, and based on income alone, 80% of county employees qualify for the affordable workforce housing programs. That's just Palm Beach County. I would imagine if the municipalities took a deep dive into their salaries, they'd see the same thing. Along with that, we saw that about 99% of teachers qualify for affordable housing programs. And so there's a lot of work, and I think that for the most part, you hear the conversation, it's related to what the county can do. But I would also come back and say if a municipality is hiring or have staff that qualify for these programs, what are those municipalities doing for their employees?
And that's absolutely, Jonathan, you're correct. We have experienced that from the municipality's standpoint, that our own employees are not being able to find housing. They don't make enough. And we have adjusted some pays because of that, because we looked at it and thought, how are they going to be in this community if they can't afford to live here. But affordable housing is going to look different. I mean, the town of Palm Beach and the village of Wellington aren't really what you think about for affordable housing, but we have to work together to make sure that the county can function. And we all have a part in it, and no one should be blocked out of the conversation. We're all participating in one way or another, and it is our city employees also that we have concerns about. But when it comes to home rule issues, we say home rule, it means local voices making local choices. From a League of Cities perspective, we're going to have to work together to find those things that work for each one, but it's not going to be a statewide solution. It's going to be something that's different from community to community and from city to city.
And now I've got some good news on this, if we're ready for some good news. We keep talking about how we have to do this, and we realize one thing we've been truly missing is a housing plan for the community. So we're going to start out by doing a study to figure out what is our actual need, a housing and supply, a demand and supply study. But then we are, thanks to the Community Foundation and their grant, the Housing Leadership Council is working with the community, the business leaders to develop a plan. So we know exactly how much housing we need at each income category, where in the community that's most appropriate, and how we can most cost effectively do that. Because if we get those Sadowski funds back, if we get the bond, we want to show that we're making really good investments. And maybe it is just that little bit of gap financing. I love those units, and you can call me if you want to find those hidden units that are out there that are part of market rate developments that I can say, hey, gee, you can pay a couple $100 less rent than everybody else. But we're going to include that all in a plan, and it's something that the Community Foundation, as I said, really the light went on. We're making it possible, and we're moving ahead and making sure that we know how we're going to get from point A to point B. Because that's something, if you go on a trip, you got to start out with a plan on how you're going to get there. So we're going to do a plan. We're going to have those Google instructions or whatever in your head telling you this is what we need to do step by step. And we're into that process, and we're really excited about previewing that and showing the community how we're going to get there.
With that invitation to call you, you may have opened up a can of worms.
Yeah.
Besides just me giving out her phone number, everyone's going to do it now.
There you go. We have about 3 minutes left. I'm determined to get in these last two questions. We'll do a little bit of a rapid fire here. So let's just kind of go down the line. If you guys would tell me what it is that your respective organizations are doing to address the lack of affordable housing.
We're looking at some code changes and some density redevelopment incentives in Wellington.
The county has, in conjunction with the development community, made changes to its workforce housing ordinance to make that a little bit more palatable while still ensuring we're getting workforce housing units.
That's something that the Housing Leadership Council works on constantly. We have a public policy committee. I was looking at regulatory barriers, how we can reduce fees, find other ways to pay for fees. And as I said, our most exciting news is really finally a plan on how we're going to get there.
One of the things we're trying to do is identify investors who actually look forward to investing in workforce housing. When you think about it, these units are lower priced. So that means they should rent it more quickly. They should turn over less. They should provide a stable source of ongoing occupancy for any development there. So to the extent that we can find an investor who's willing to take a 15% IRR rather than an 18 to 20% IRR, that helps us with what we can charge on the rents and what we can do. And if there's one other point I could make, Holly, when people hear housing density or more housing units, they may think, well, we just have to keep pushing out west. That's actually not the case. One of the most exciting frontiers right now is redevelopment and repurposing of existing retail centers and commercial space. So if you go along the main commercial corridors like US 1, Dixie Highway, Military Trail, you'll see a lot of these older shopping centers with vacant retail units. A lot of those can be repurposed and turned into real mixed-use centers where they have housing, they have retail, they have restaurants, and they have office. So that work has started. We're actually doing one of those developments in another county. But this is really the wave of the future in terms of how to do it through an existing commercial corridors so it doesn't increase the traffic. In some cases, it reduces the traffic. But that's going to be a ready source of production of new housing units, a fair share of which should be affordable and workforce housing in the coming years.
Okay, I think somebody back there really likes you. They put more time on the clock.
More time. Since we do have more time, can I just bring up another?
Yes, please.
Another major issue we're facing with affordable housing is our homeless population. And it's not just what you think. It's not just the people who are living in the streets. Homeless also includes those that are living in their cars. They're working, they have jobs. And so that's a population that we don't want to forget about. We're talking about those that own homes. We're talking about those that can rent. But we're also talking about those that at this time may not have any financial means at all to afford housing, but they are part of this community, and we also need to make sure that we're vigilant in addressing housing for our homeless population. A few years back, the county established the Lewis Center. I know we're looking at the second Homeless Resource Center. We're also looking at a Homeless Resource Center opportunity out in the Glades community. So any support that you all have as we're looking into these communities would absolutely be appreciated because that's a population. Suzanne mentioned it earlier, and I want to hearken on it too, our senior population. We need to make sure that we have quality housing for our seniors. They were the pioneers that helped to establish this community to help us get to where we are, and we don't want to forget about them as the community continues to grow.
One of the things you brought up, homelessness can be classified as somebody living in their car. WPTV started a series this week, The American Dream, Affordable Housing in Crisis, where we profiled two single mothers. One of them works 108 hours a week. She's been living in her car with two of her kids. She just got into a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment, but the waiting list was horrendous.
Yes, yes. And that's where, again, like I said, we're talking about, those that are making incomes, but there are some that are at that lower end that are 30% or below the area median income, where maybe their annual household income is $20,000, $25,000 a year or less. We need to make sure we're not forgetting about that population.
Got it. Last question.
That also includes people that are couch surfing, or
Yes.
or they might not even have a car to sleep in. They might stay with a friend for 2 weeks. It makes it very hard, and then another friend. So there's a lot of transient homeless also that aren't necessarily a street person, but they're still in that category.
Absolutely.
You have an audience here, 400 or 500 people at your disposal. Closing remarks, what is the takeaway? What are your takeaways, and what can people do to get involved and make a difference?
Well, I know so many in this room that volunteer in all kinds of ways. I can't even imagine that we can't solve this together, because, when I look out here, I serve on so many committees with you. We have a lot of activity. We need to harness it. We need to get it in the right direction, and make everyone else that we know a part of it, instead of having people on the outside looking in.
I would say get involved. While we absolutely appreciate everything that the legislature is doing, housing isn't the only task that they're tackling. They're doing a lot of things. We definitely want to encourage full funding, because those dollars go a lot of ways. We definitely want to encourage you all to look into the senior organizations that's dealing with housing for our seniors, organizations that's dealing with housing for our homeless, so we can ensure that we're tackling even those at the very low to extremely low end income end of our population.
And just to add to that, really think about the people, as I said, who make your life better every day. I go through my day and I really think, and because I am who I am, I actually ask them what their housing situation's like. But if not, just think about it when you go pick up your kids from childcare, when you go to Publix and someone helps you out with your groceries, whatever it is, the valet doing your car. We've made it easy for you. We have kind of a cheat sheet that we're going to be handing out at the end that will tell you what those people are facing in terms of housing, and really how difficult it is for them to make ends meet. And it's also important that we have housing so we can attract new workforce. Just one other quick story. My husband works for Aerojet Rocketdyne, and they're having trouble recruiting starting engineers at $80,000 a year because they can't afford housing down here. You got a real problem when you have homelessness and you can't recruit a rocket scientist to your community. So we really have to get serious about this. So there are so many different ways you can support this. We're also going to talk to you about, on this, we've explained how the housing funds work. And yeah, I did put my phone number and my email on here. I do want to hear from you because there's going to be times when we issue action alerts. And we don't ask for it very often, but there's times when you personally can really make a difference and collect those stories. If you have those stories, we want to hear about those people in the community and make it real. And I'm so glad that series is going on, but we really have to take care of the whole community in this process.
Okay, I would say support the Community Foundation, which has made housing a priority. They're a big backer of Suzanne's organization, Housing Leadership Council. So that's where I would start. When you hear the words housing and density, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's really going to be the key to unlocking our future. And finally, the time's really come for Palm Beach County to take control of its destiny when it comes for housing. We have a population of 1.5 million. That's larger than 11 states, including Hawaii. So we want the legislator to treat it like a trust fund, not a slush fund. But the time's also ripe for Palm Beach County to have a dedicated source of funding for affordable housing. Thank you.
I know that we could have put another 30 minutes on the clock and gone the distance with this, but we are going to end it here with 2 seconds to spare. Thank you all again, educational and informative. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you.
As you all prepare to leave, we just want to remind you there is going to be an information sheet for you. Please take this, read it. I think that you might be amazed by some of the statistics on here. It really is important that you know exactly what we are addressing and what we're speaking to today. We do want to take the time out very briefly to again thank all of our donors, our sponsors, and thank you all. We know that you've given up part of your day to be here to join us. We truly appreciate it. Now, one more fun thing before we leave. We want you to look inside of your flyer on the table, and it's not a lottery ticket, but it's the next best thing. If you have one of these orange flyers, you get to take the beautiful centerpieces, so enjoy those. Oh, I hear the crowd go, ah.